guys, welcome to the Sheroic podcast. I'm Cassey.
And I'm Lisa. And today we're talking about holding a grudge.
Grr.
All right, guys, so welcome. Today we're discussing holding a grudge and forgiving and forgetting, which we know a lot of people do encounter. And I want to start with a definition of what grudge is. It says, feeling of resentment harbored because of some real or fancied wrong. And I actually found that really interesting because it doesn't just say real, it says fancied.
Fancied?
Yeah.
Doesn't that mean like that's something you want? When you fancy something, right?
Right, so imagine it's kind of, and that's how I interpret it, almost like an exaggerated emotion. I don't know.
That's super weird. I'm going to pull that up on my phone
Yeah,
just so I can
pull it
read
up.
it. Sometimes I find it easier to understand something when I can read it and hear it at the same
Yeah, that's
time.
interesting.
Okay. Feeling of resentment harbored because of some real or fancied wrong. That's also a really difficult definition to understand.
It is, but I think it taps into something about holding a grudge that not necessarily it's always based on truth, right? It's kind of based on like an emotional reaction that you may have.
Okay.
At least that's how I interpreted it. And I actually think that's true, right? Like, and we can go deeper into certain situations that we've been in, but I think it's very common that grudges aren't always necessarily based on the reality of what happened.
That's actually really true. I guess I never thought about having a grudge that wasn't based on a true wrongdoing. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
And then we've got forgiveness. Do you have the definition of
Okay, so the definition of forgiveness is the act of consciously deciding to let go of resentment or vengeance. You know what? I love this definition because before I read that, I thought forgiveness was somehow, I don't know, almost like cleaning someone free of their wrongdoing. But it's not about that person. It's about you deciding to let go of your resentment.
Right.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I love that too.
Wow. So do you hold grudges, Lisa?
I don't, but I feel like it's been something that I've worked towards. So growing up, I saw this is a true story, my grandmother. So I'm going to set the stage.
Okay.
She's 5 foot from Cyprus, so really thick Greek accent, has one of those had those glasses that were so thick that the eyes looked kind of warped.
Oh, yeah.
So this tiny little old Greek woman with really thick glasses. And I remember I was probably around 10 years old. And she had fallen out with her son, my uncle, because my uncle was actually with a woman who wasn't his wife and children. So he left his wife and children, married another woman. Traditionally, in the Greek culture, that's especially back then, that wasn't acceptable.
Yep.
So she literally stopped talking to my uncle because he married another woman. One year, he sent her a Christmas card. And in the Christmas card, he wrote his name and he wrote his wife's name. Now, I'm like 10 years old and I see my grandmother. She opens up this card and she loses it.
Oh, my God.
She runs up and gets white out and starts whiting out my uncle's wife's name.
Whoa.
And in the process, literally, and I'm not exaggerating, this is an actual quote of what my grandmother said. I'm going to do it with a bit of a Greek accent.
Okay.
She's like, I go poison her, I go push her in the fire.
What?
So, in translation, I'm going to poison her and push her in the fire.
What?
That's an actual quote from a little 5 foot old Greek woman. And that's how much she held grudges. That's how much like animosity and vengeance that she held on to. And when I was young and I saw that and I saw other elements and there are many stories like that, I just even as a kid, I was like, she just seems angry. Like she doesn't seem happy about it. And so every time my uncle's name was brought up or his wife's name was brought up, it literally was like a trigger and a switch. And she would go from being like this super sweet, beautiful grandmother to like the devil. And so I literally was like, oh, wow, at that age, I got that it was mindset. Or at least I didn't have the wording about mindset, but I just thought that can't be good for you.
No. It can't.
So
oh my
so
gosh.
growing up like that, I already had realized like that's not good for you. Yeah, like how do you prevent that?
So when you saw that, do you think that helped you not want to hold grudges?
Exactly.
Okay.
So I think it's, and in fact, do you think it's easy to hold a grudge?
Yeah, I think it's really easy to hold grudge because it makes you feel better.
Right.
It makes you feel like, well, you're wrong and I'm right and I'm allowed to feel this way. But the truth is, you're kind of just poisoning yourself. You're not, I mean, maybe you're hurting the other person because depending on what your actions are, like I'm holding a grudge against you, so I'm going to say mean things to you or whatever. But like, it is the basis for the actions you're going to take next, like whether you're going to backstab them or say something nasty or never talk to them again. It's really a lot on you and less on the other person.
Right.
So like for me, I tend to not hold grudges. I think mainly because I don't care enough to. And secondly, I forget. so when Sam and I get in fights,
something's
oh totally, I like totally forget. So I'm like, huh, what? But what saves me is that when someone does something wrong to me, I distance myself from that person, and so even if I forget, they can't really do wrong again because I'm no longer near them. So that's kind of how I deal with it.
You do that before you forget because you know you're going to forget?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not like something I consciously say, like, make sure you get away from this person before you forget. It's just kind of like what I do. And I think it served me in the long run because I end up forgetting about that situation, which means that I can't hold a grudge because there's no emotional attachment to it. So that's how I deal with it. But my mom and sister are very different. My mom, I would have to say, is one of the biggest grudge holders ever. From what I understand, there have been people who have done wrong things to her, and she still talks about it to this day. And I feel like that is so unhealthy. Whether or not she believes that they did it with a good intention or a bad intention or with an evil intention, for herself, she really needs to let it go. And I've been telling her that for a really long time, but she keeps bringing it up. Even like grudges against my dad, and they've been married for a long time. So, yep. That's my mom.
Yeah. It's, and going back to what you were saying, it's easy to hold a grudge. And I think that when I saw my grandmother doing that type of thing, I recognized that it wasn't good for you.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's easy too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, for me, creating ways to not hold a grudge, like actually actively working to not do it, because I saw that the results weren't great. And so going back to what you were saying about like maybe step one is distancing yourself from that person. Is that the first thing you do? Or like do you try to resolve the issue first, and then if you feel like you've hit a brick wall where you can't get over it, is that when you then distance yourself?
So I think there's two levels. Like if the person is really important to me, like of course I'm going to try to make it work and be like, hey, like why did you do that? I'm really like a why person. I need to know, because I want to fix myself if I did something wrong. And so when something happens, it really bothers me and I need to know. But if it's someone that I barely even know and they're already showing disrespect or whatever, and you just kind of use your gut and you know that I'm just like, you know what, whatever. Like I'm just not going to talk to you anymore. And if at some point we end up running into each other and we're good for each other, cool. But I'm not going to put any effort into trying to fix something that wasn't even really there.
Right.
And so that's how I deal with that. I'm a big, like, if you are making me unhappy, I just am going to not have you in my life.
It's interesting, actually, what you said. It seems like it's easier to hold a grudge on people that are close to you. Do you think it's because that you've been wronged and you don't, right? Because if it was a stranger or someone you don't know and they wronged you, let's say,
right,
I wouldn't necessarily be bothered, right? Like what you said, you're like, well, I don't really know him in a way, like I'll just distance myself. But when it's somebody who, let's say you're committed to, whether it's a friend or a boyfriend, and they've done something wrong, like I think that gets deeper in your deeper in your soul of being hurt. And so I think that resentment or that grudge is actually more rooted than someone that you don't really know.
I think it depends. So when I cleanse myself of a grudge, because if I hold grudges, they last about like 10 minutes. Like they're really fast. So every time I cleanse myself of a grudge, it means that we had a conversation and we agreed to move on. So they start back at a clean state, whether you want to call that 0% or 100% or whatever. So for me personally, and this is just for me, it doesn't get deeper rooted because I clean it every time. But if it keeps happening, just like if something's getting dirty, there's going to be residue. And if it's really so hard to clean, you feel like, okay, I got to throw it away, then that's something different. But I think for the other side, if they really didn't mean to do it and you had a conversation and you guys both feel like, I'm sorry, like, let's move forward, then it's a clean slate. So it kind of just depends on the person.
Yeah, and that metaphor I absolutely love, by the way, of like dust settling, right? Because it's like day one, dust settles on the countertop. You doesn't really notice, you don't really think about it. But if you don't cleanse it, like you were saying, day after day after day, that kind of dust just keeps settling and it gets thicker. And then I think that at that some point, it becomes very difficult to clean it.
Exactly. It hardens.
Right.
And like very literally and scientifically, if you leave something there for too long, it will stain it and you can't get it out.
Right.
And sometimes you have to use a hammer or a shovel or something like to get it out. And then you start ruining what was really there. So, yeah.
I like the metaphor.
Well, thank you.
We've got a question from a fan.
Okay.
This is from Grace on Twitter.
Okay.
Is it wrong to forgive someone but still not to want to be around them because you can't forget what you've done? So now that's kind of going into forgiving and forgetting, right? So if you have a grudge and then you decide, I'm going to forgive them. So I'm going to let go of this grudge. If you can't forget it, does it eliminate the forgiveness?
Is it wrong to forgive someone but still not want to be around them because you can't forget what they've done? Okay, so I think this is what I do. So I can forgive someone because, again, that's for yourself, but you don't want to be around them. So that's me distancing myself because you can't forget. So if the act of not seeing them helps you forget, then I think that's totally fine. And if the person has wronged you in such a way that you just don't want to be around their presence, they just make you really uncomfortable, then there's really no need to be around them anymore. But I also see a lot of questions from our community saying like, well, what if that person is your mom or your dad or your family and you literally can't distance yourself because you go home and have dinner with them every night, say you're in high school or something like that. And that's something that I dealt with. And I think I had to not physically distance myself, but sadly, relationship-wise and emotionally distance myself from my parents so that what they said meant less to me, if you know what I mean. So it's a different type of distance. Right. So this is so interesting because just a week ago, or even this past weekend, I had a conversation with my mom and she broke down and cried and said that she's really upset and sad that our relationship is no longer the same as how it used to be, which is interesting because, first of all, I'm not 14 years old anymore. Of course, it's different. And then,
but you say of course, but isn't it of course from your perspective, not necessarily from your mom's?
Yeah, but like, don't you feel like if someone's gonna grow up another like 16 years, like things are gonna change. Of course, it's not gonna be exactly the same. Even like yesterday, I'm not the same person as I am today. Like, and that's just 24 hours apart. So thinking 16 years.
But if your mum holds a grudge, for her, she clearly holds on to emotions for a long time.
Oh yeah, yeah. She totally does. And so I tried to explain to her that based on certain rules that she set on, you know, my love life and things like that, that I had to distance myself because I felt like I couldn't talk to her about certain things.
That's interesting.
And she wasn't willing to open up and like accept the fact that, oh, this is why. And I kept telling her, I'm not blaming you. I'm just explaining what happened over the past 16 years. And anyway, for me, what I said was like, you know what? Like, doesn't matter. We don't need to explain ourselves. Let's just start fresh right here. Let's move on. We'll be closer now. And then so that calmed her down. And then, you know, we're moving forward. And so that's me, the whole clean slate thing, because the history slate is like super dirty and I just don't want to deal with it. So we're just going to build a new one.
So how do you then, with someone like your mum, start fresh? Can you actually forget?
I don't think she can forget because that's her personality. And I think for me, I have to almost overcompensate, put a little bit more effort into the relationship to make sure she feels happy. And it's very interesting, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but as we get older, our parents become more like children, and we have to begin taking care of them more, not just physically, but like emotionally as well. And so I've noticed that. And I am very aware of the fact that I need to coddle my mom and say certain things that will make her happy, because if I want a relationship to be a certain way and to be pleasant, I need to do that. Not saying that I'm going to be fake, but I'm just aware of what words trigger her and what words don't.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, I would love to have an honest, 100% truthful, transparent relationship where I can just say exactly how I feel, but I know my mom, and I think certain words, like, she just won't be able to handle it.
Right.
And that's just the truth. Yeah.
And that's going into then, you know, even if you don't hold grudges with people, what do you do if people hold a grudge on you? Even if you feel like it's maybe unwarranted.
Well, let's see. So my sister, I love her, but she can get very emotional sometimes. And so if I do something that doesn't make her quite happy, or maybe she doesn't understand why I did something. For example, like if I'm working really late and I can't talk to her on the phone about something, and maybe it's really important. So if she's listening to this, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to make you look bad. I'm just trying to tell a story. Again, love my sister. So sometimes she'll hold a grudge against me. And even if it's for like that hour or like the next few days, like it makes me feel so terrible. Like I almost want to die. Not really, but like it kills my heart. I feel like my heart is turning into like this black, like slowly turning black and like crumbling apart. Like that's how I feel when someone holds a grudge against me. And especially when it's someone dear to you.
So what do you do?
You know, and I don't even know if this is a good thing, but my tendency is I go to the person, I keep asking, hey, why are you mad at me? Why are you mad? Why are you mad? Why are you mad? What can we do? And because I'm a problem solver. Right. And so for me, I just want to know how I can be better, how I can fix it. But my sister likes to do silent treatment on me. So she's like, everything's
that's like
fine.
The worst mix, right? So she doesn't want to talk. You want to keep finding the answer.
Yes, and I know silent treatment because I use that on Sam.
Okay, interesting.
So she's like, it's fine, but like really quick and short, like through text, like no, like with a period, you know it's not good.
Oh, yeah.
And then
or if it's like a one-word answer with no punctuation whatsoever.
Exactly. So sometimes you just have to let it pass. This just happened like 3 days ago. Yeah. And I was so bothered. I was telling Sam, like, what do I do? Oh my gosh, why is she so upset? And he's like, just let it pass. Like, give her time. And sure enough, 3 days later, she was fine. Right. And sometimes I just feel like maybe people have to realize what they're doing. Because I did try to say, like, I think I texted her. I was like, hey, seems like you're mad. I'm really sorry if I did something wrong. Love you. Yeah. I mean, what else can I do? Yeah. Right? I don't know. What would you do if someone held a grudge against you?
Yeah, I think it would depend on what the circumstance was and who it was. But ultimately, I think it is exactly what you said. I would find, like, where did I go wrong? Right. Because saying it's their fault or they're the type of person that holds grudges doesn't help you improve the situation, right? Now it's just passing blame. So initially, I would always look at myself and say, how did I play a part in this? What did I actually do that I can change? What do I believe that I did wrong? And then what do they believe I did wrong? And put myself in their situation. And I think that's really useful and helpful in situations like that, because I think you need to be empathetic and you need to see the situation from the other person's perspective. Even if you then decide you disagree with it, right? Like they say that you were ignoring them. Right. And you're like, I wasn't ignoring them. Oh my God, but I did this and I did this. That doesn't help you. So put yourself in their shoes and try and see it from their perspective. So for instance, if they feel like I was ignoring them, why do they feel like that? Even if I don't think that's true. Is it because they're feeling lonely? Is it because they just got rejected from somebody else in their life? You know, like really put it into perspective. Once you put it into perspective, I think it allows you to understand and then have that talk with them of like, look, I didn't mean to ignore you. Like, I'm really sorry I wasn't there for you. That was not my intention. Because I think that's important as well, right? What are your intentions? So I really didn't mean to upset you. That wasn't my intention. Next time I will do it like this. Or next time, please tell me how to handle it better so I can actually better communicate with you and you don't feel like this. Yeah. Speak in their language, I think, is very important. Yeah. So some people want to hear I'm sorry. Some people want to have acts of service, like sending them flowers or sending them a text or writing a letter to them or whatever, right? Like, what is that person's language, and then how do you speak to them in that? And then if they still couldn't let go, at some point I'd be like, I don't know what else to do. I will be compassionate. I absolutely will never just like turn my back. Fine, if they want to hold a grudge, they can hold a grudge. That doesn't help you.
No.
Because now you're holding on to resentment.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to just go, okay, sadly right now I don't see an out. I don't see how they can let go of the grudge. So I'm going to step back, because now I can't be sucked into that world of trying to figure out and go out of my way. And like, because do you ever get that point where like you're ripping your hair out? Like, I don't know what else to do. Like, I'm so sorry. And that, again, you just get frustrated and it becomes a vicious cycle.
Yeah. I feel like if people would understand your intention, that would help a lot. I think you and I are the same in the way that we will put ourselves in someone else's shoes and ask, what did I do wrong? How can I fix it? And if everyone did that, I think we'd all be fine. But it's when we start passing the blame, that's where the problem comes in. I just think holding grudges is so unhealthy. And you actually have a fact about how unhealthy holding a grudge is, like, scientifically.
I do. Well, thank you, Cassie, for leading us into that fact.
That professional?
So according to Health Magazine, actually, holding a grudge puts your body in a constant state of fight or flight, which raises blood pressure. High blood pressure is later associated with heart disease. Now, look, I want to make it very clear. It's not like if you're going to hold a grudge, all of a sudden you're going to get heart disease.
Right.
But it's actually, like you said, really fascinating to see how the effects of holding a grudge can have on the body and how it can be very unhealthy.
Isn't that crazy? I wonder, so holding a grudge must also be the same thing as increasing your stress levels.
Right, exactly.
And when you increase your stress levels, your cortisol levels go up, therefore increasing your lower belly fat and things like that. So I think that's kind of the same thing. It's just that it's crazy that emotions are chemical, and chemical things are physical things you can measure in your body and you can see on your skin, on the scale, like in measurements and stuff. It's wild.
All right, so let's talk about tactics then.
Okay.
So let's say you're naturally inclined to hold a grudge.
Okay.
And this is what kind of going back to what I was saying earlier is it's easy to hold a grudge. And so for me, seeing other people do it and realizing, wow, that isn't good for them. They never seem happy. It always seems like a trigger if you bring up somebody's name that they don't like, and then they derail, and they've gone from being like this happy soul to like all of a sudden this angry soul. So do you have any tips or tricks
for getting myself, like, how do I get out of a grudge in 10 minutes?
Right.
Like what I do?
Yeah, in fact, that's that's actually a really good clip. How to get out of a grudge in less than 10 minutes.
Okay. My first tactic is to approach the person and ask them what I did wrong and how I can fix it.
Okay.
That's the first thing I always do. And usually if they are open to talk about it, then we have a conversation that lasts less than 10 minutes and then I'm out. That's if the person is complying.
So would you still approach somebody immediately if you felt like you were absolutely right and that person had no, let's say, right to hold a grudge on you?
Either way, if someone's feeling sad or disappointed, I want to help make them feel better, whether I'm right or wrong. Okay. So I would still go over either it's me begging for their forgiveness.
Because you know you've done wrong.
Because I know I've done wrong. Okay. Or to trying to find a solution. First of all, to see if I did wrong and I thought I was right, or just to see what's going on their end so I can help this situation in general be better. I'm such a solutions-oriented person that I need to know what's going on both sides so that I can figure out how to fix it.
So, because you don't seem to ever really suffer from lowering your defenses, right? Like, you don't mind saying, I'm sorry, I messed up. And neither do I. I think it's so powerful. And as a kid, I never would say I'm sorry because it meant, oh, God, now I'm admitting guilt.
So wait, when did you get away from that
feeling? That I
realized
realized it wasn't serving me.
And how old were you when that happened?
I don't know if there was a certain age, but I definitely remember in my teens where I went through a transition of like, I'd never wanted to feel badly about myself.
Right.
So I never wanted to admit that I was wrong because admitting that you're wrong makes you feel badly about yourself. And so I always saw that as a negative. Now I see it as the most powerful thing you can possibly do. Like admitting that you're wrong now gives yourself an opportunity to get better and to fix something and to improve and to grow and to learn. And so because I find empowerment in that, I'm actually definitely now much more open to admitting, like, oh my God, yes, I messed up. How can I do better? What did I do wrong? How could I improve? But back then, admitting I was wrong or did bad just made me feel bad about myself. And I think that it's a protective mechanism. People don't want to feel bad about themselves. So sometimes then, like, at least for me, when I was around 16, I became then dogmatic about my beliefs. Right? Like, no, I didn't do wrong. Like, that's on them. They were the ones. And it is like what you said earlier. It is slow poison because you're just holding on to like this anxiousness and animosity and anger and frustration, and it just builds. So admitting immediately that you're wrong, I think is, if you really do believe that, can be so enlightening.
And so freeing.
And so freeing.
So my dad, and I feel like I'm talking about my whole family now.
But I think it's important everyone goes through these experiences.
Yeah. So my dad, he is very forgetful, but he has an ego issue. And so for him, he never says sorry, ever. All he does is defend himself till like the death. And so for me, it's really hard to forgive my dad because he keeps making the same mistakes over and over again. And like I said, I'm very solutions oriented. So we always have a conversation. We'll even text about the problem. We'll email about the problem. So it's in writing. It's through phone. Like, and yet he forgets. So he keeps repeating the same mistakes. And so for me, the way I deal with that, and I don't even know if this is healthy or not, but I just try to push it to the side and deal with him situation by situation.
So yeah, you almost can't forget. Which
I
seems
can't
like
forget.
You're protecting yourself though, right?
What do you mean by protecting
So for
myself?
instance, you don't want to push your dad out of your life completely.
Right.
So you're allowing him to still be in your life, but you can't forget because he keeps doing it. So it's almost a protective mechanism to push it aside so that you don't keep always getting hurt time and time again.
Yeah, but I think I'm also very aware that it's making our relationship a little bit more dusty or dirty. Like, I know it's happening. I don't think he knows it's happening because he's kind of unaware sometimes. And I think that's why he keeps doing these same mistakes again. But again, I don't want to push my dad out of my life. And that's when it gets tricky because my original solution was either we talk it out, we fix it and we move on, or I push you out of my life, I never have to deal with you again. With my dad, it's somewhere in the middle. And I mean, this is life. Nothing is black and white. My dad is a very gray area and I'm still trying to figure out what to do with him. But I appreciate the days when we're happy. And then when we're upset at each other, we try to, argue it out. The one good thing about my dad, though, is that he doesn't hold grudges. So we can really talk about a situation, two things that are, or one thing that's making us really mad, figure out what's wrong, and then move on with a solution. The hard part is him wanting to be right, so we can't figure out what's wrong. And sometimes I just let him defend himself until he can't defend himself anymore. And then I'm just like, you know what, let's just move on. Like, there's just sometimes there's no point in arguing. Like, it just brings me so much unhappiness. So I just like with my mom, I'm just like, you know what, let's just clean slate. Like, let's move on. But my dad has had a lot of different clean slates. And I think I've dealt with him more calmly than how my mom or sister have dealt with him. And anyway, it's still something I'm figuring out. I mean, if any of you guys have solutions on how to deal with your parents, someone who has a big ego and never thinks they're wrong, let me know.
We want to hear from you.
Because I need your suggestions.
I mean, it kind of goes back to this question the fan asked, right? Is it wrong to forgive someone but still not want to be around them because you can't forget what they've done? I think it's important to think about who that person is, right? Because if it's your dad, you don't want to cut him out of your life. So you do want to be around him still, but you have to put in things in place that and keep figuring out. Like you said, you still haven't figured it out completely. I think it's just a constant exploration and you haven't given up, which is beautiful. Do you think it's different if it's like a friend or let's say even a partner, like how you would handle it? If it was a friend, would you then just eventually, like if you'd gone over the same things like you're doing with your dad, would you, I don't want to say give up, but would you eventually just like say, I just can't have you in my life
Just put
anymore?
less effort into the relationship, into the friendship?
Yeah.
Probably. I think if my dad weren't my dad, he would be out of my life like a long time ago, like 15 years ago. And if it were a partner, they're like family. So I would really try to work it out before you have to just be like, nope. But, you know, some people do estrange themselves from their parents. So, I mean, it does get to that point. I moved away from my family. So they live in Northern California and I live in Southern California. So that distance, I think, has also helped me, because being around them every single day was driving me crazy. And so, in a sense, I took my own advice and distanced myself, but we still talk and text, so it's not that bad, but still, when there's ego, it's always bad.
So proximity matters then, I guess.
It totally matters. It totally. So I guess if you have the funds or, you know, the opportunity to, and you can't deal with your parents, then try to move out. Like if you can afford it, if you have a job or someone safe to live with or something like that.
So yeah, I do find it fascinating how, at least for me, grudges, they actually almost depend on the person that I'm dealing with the issue. So if it was business, I would cut off emotional attachment and just go, okay, well, I've just learned a very powerful lesson from this. Don't hold a grudge, but let me tell you, I'm going to be very aware next time if I do business with them again, what the past has taught me. So for me, forgetting in that situation doesn't serve me. I actually don't want to forget, because I think, especially when it comes to business, it's important to remember and then act accordingly. So I think business is one thing. I think friendship, because you're not necessarily blood related, it is somewhat easier to distance yourself and, God, I don't want to say cut out of your life, but if that's what it takes, then you can. But you have to, again, see if that actually serves your goal. Like, do you really love them as a friend and you want their friendship forever? Then how do you make that work? Maybe is you don't speak to them as much. Maybe you don't necessarily share as deeper details or info about it. But you still stay friends and you're chit-chatty. Then it's partners. For me, with my husband, Tom, I never hold a grudge. Ever. I never have and I never will. And it's so important, because I feel like that sort of thing in a relationship can end in true disaster. Because with Tom, I give every ounce of me. I don't lie. I don't even do white lies. Like, even like the tiniest pathetic lie where I was like, I had a shower today and I didn't. Right? Like, I wouldn't even do a white lie with him. Because I give myself completely over to him, I feel like there's nothing I can hide or push aside or pretend that I've forgotten and not really forgotten, because eventually it will catch up with me and our relationship won't be as strong. So with him, I make sure that if something has stung me, I know I can't hold a grudge, because that doesn't serve our relationship. I have to make sure that we talk about it, that we go through every step, that we talk about how we prevent it next time, so that I don't hold a grudge and then spit it out in an argument down the road.
Right, and those are always the worst. Like, where did this come from?
Has anyone ever done that to you?
I'm sure they have, and I have forgotten, so I can't talk about it right now.
But where they just like throw it at you, right?
Oh yeah,
where it's like, yeah, but you did this, and you're like, that was 3 months ago. I thought we dealt with it.
Yeah. So, does Tom hold grudges against you?
No.
So you both are super like grudge free.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that if something is a problem, we have to discuss it in that moment. And if it hasn't been resolved, we'll keep talking about it.
Yeah, that's what Sam taught me. So when we got together, and the first time I did silent treatment to him, he was like, what is going on? We need to talk about this. And so he's trained me to talk about my feelings. And so now grudges only last 10 minutes. So yeah. But he's been really good about that. Really good about helping me release my emotions and clean that toxicity.
So, in fact, when you would go quiet, what is the process like? Would you just be thinking about it? Would you get like obsessive in your mind, or you would just shut it out?
Oh, no. I think it is... So it's really weird. You know how in the definition it said like a fancied wrong? So it's very weird, but it's almost like, well, I'm mad at you, and I'm going to make you feel bad for it for like 10 minutes. And then like you almost like, what's the word? You
punish?
Yes, you feel a reward out of punishing them. It's a terrible thing. It's not a great thing.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
I need to say, I love that you can be this open. I think it's so important, because people want to hide behind it.
Yeah.
So let's throw it out there. Let's be raw, because I think so many people actually do feel like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't address it. They hide it. They pretend, and it doesn't serve them. So
yeah. So it almost feels good. Like, it's really weird.
Be that honest.
It almost feels like, haha, like you deserve it. Now, like, be over there and be upset that you don't even know what you did to me. Like, kind of feels like that. Then after,
because you're making him feel guilty as well, right?
So there's almost a sense of power in the silence treatment. And so I think that's why I do it. And I'm being so analytical of myself. And I know this is why I do it, so I shouldn't do it, but I do it anyway.
But I love that you can identify
it. I know exactly what I'm doing. And I know that it kills him. But so I'm working on it. But anyway, because I know what I'm doing, my silent treatment has gone from being, 2 hours to 1 hour to now 10 minutes, maybe next time 7 minutes or whatever. And what always happens is at the end bits of silent treatment, I look at Sam and then I just burst out laughing. Do I just sound hysterical? Because he knows I'm being ridiculous. He knows exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. And then I just have to end it, and we look at each other. We're like, okay, moving on.
So what do you tell yourself? Because I'm like, imagine there's someone at home right now going, yeah, I do the silent treatment. Oh my God, I do it. And you've triggered something in them, right? The power thing. What do you say to yourself then to get yourself into a giggly mood? Because that, to me, like, if I'm annoyed, like, to go from being annoyed, like, silent treatment to giggling, I don't know if I could do it.
I know, it's crazy, right? I think it's the self-awareness. It's totally self-awareness. I know that I'm being ridiculous. And once I've got my satisfaction from that, like, 10 minutes of making someone feel bad, I'm like, okay, it's over. It was really funny. Like, I got what I needed. Right. But I think that's something between me and Sam. Like, we can do that.
Right.
But I think if it's something really, like, terribly serious, and I don't know or think that I would react the same way, that's just how I react with Sam.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what we were saying earlier about how it's different depending on who the pet is with.
Totally.
That you kind of almost handle that differently.
Yeah.
I don't think ultimately it serves you. And I think that that's the question that I started asking myself when I was younger, right? Like, I'm feeling like angry, like it would be a trigger, right? Like, if I was holding a grudge with someone and that name came up, it didn't make me feel good. And when I saw my grandmother, who held on to grudges for 10 years, 20 years, I mean, literally, she had a photo of somebody. One person in the photo she still spoke to, and the other person in the photo she didn't speak to. She actually folded the photo and put it back in the frame.
Whoa.
And she had it in the frame for like 25 years.
Whoa.
Because she still wanted, it was a black and white old, like one of those photos, and the person had passed away, so she didn't want to throw the photo away. But the other person she didn't talk to, so she just folded the photo. And literally every time she'd see the photo, you could see it was folded. So to me, that's just a reminder of the person that you don't like.
Yeah.
So I would see these things and I would just see how angry she was, and like, how can you hold on to that for 25 years? It's like, it doesn't serve you. It doesn't make you a happy person. I always say you get what you focus on. So if all you're doing is focusing on the negative and you're focusing on the people that upset you, what emotion do you think you're going to, have? You're going to have a negative emotion. And so I just kind of saw it, and it was actually a great lesson for me to go, like, you can't be like this. It doesn't help your life. You're not a happy person when you remind yourself of the grudge or you remind yourself of the person. And so you just need to actively work to change it, because it's not going to happen by accident. And so, yeah, for me, I just kind of like drummed that into my head. And so those are kind of the phrases I would repeat to myself to help me get out of that loop of every time, I would find myself wanting to hold a grudge. It's like, nope, doesn't serve you.
Right.
You get what you focus on. Flip the switch. What's that person's intention? Is it personal? What are they going through? What are they reflecting on you, right? Because it's like they could be going through a whole different thing and it's got nothing to do with you, but they're just letting it out because you're the easy target. That doesn't mean that you're a pushover. That just means that that's what they need to, kind of, I guess, let out their anger and frustration. Doesn't make it right, but
totally true. And because we are called the Sheroic podcast, I feel like I want to identify the superpower in this episode, and I think we identified that earlier on, and it was the power of letting your guard down and being able to say, hey, if I did something wrong, like, let me know. being able to say that I'm wrong, I think that's so powerful. Would you say that's kind of like our superpower for today?
Yeah, I like that you've done that. We should do that more.
We should do that more often.
I like that.
We should do that.
That's a nice little touch there.
Yeah.
That's a great superpower. And it's not easy. And guys,
No,
you
it's
have to work at it. The key is just to like not give up and not to succumb to it. Because when an emotion is overpowering you, it's easy to let it take over.
And you can't, because you are a Shero and you have the power to change how you want to live your life. Yeah. Well, that was a really opening episode for me, Lisa. And getting to talk about my entire family and what they're going through, and talking about myself, how I deal with stuff, is going to also help me treat Sam and other people in my life differently. Though I do think the silent treatment is kind of funny sometimes.
He finds it funny.
Oh, no, I think I find it funny. I don't think he hates it. He hates it. And Jacqueline does it to her boyfriend as well. And he hates it. And it's so funny because I will see her do it to her boyfriend Nick, and I'll just be like outside like watching this, and I'm just like, this is so ridiculous. Like, Nick's sad, Jacqueline's not saying anything, he's not saying anything, like, what is happening? So it's been interesting to see it from the outside.
I found myself that in doing the silent treatment, it's not like I do it on purpose. I just go silent. It's not like I'm actively not speaking to that one person. It's I just go silent. And I realized it comes across like kind of you know, the other person can sense it and feel it, and then they start to like think about, what have I done? And it can, I try to remove myself completely from the room until I can let go of whatever I'm holding on to, and then walk back into the room and then not do the silent treatment. So with Tom, like, I will force myself, even if I'm still a little upset, I will force myself that when I walk back into that room, go do something like touch him, hug him, kiss him on the lips, kiss him on the back of the neck. Like, I will force myself, because just by doing that, it changes the chemical brain state that I'm in.
Sure. So yeah, like in that moment where I'm like done silent treatment for 10 minutes to Sam, and then I start laughing hysterically, I'll go over and like just give him a big old hug from the back, and then, you know, and then he's just like, you're crazy. So and
that's important, right? It's like I'm sorry
that was ridiculous, but it just it's like I had to do it for myself. So. Yeah. So guys, I hope you really enjoyed today's episode. If you're on YouTube, give this video a thumbs up. Tell all your Shero friends to subscribe, and if you're listening through iTunes, please give this a rate and a review. We would really appreciate it.
Yes, we would.
Yeah.
And until next time,
be Sheroic!